If you thought Enshrouded was going to patch out the crazy overpowered ability to make an unkillable health regen build, do I have some news for you. With patch 8 now live, the fact is this build is even easier to make than it was before. So in this video, I'll show you how this new patch upgraded your Immortality build to make you even more of an untouchable powerhouse with way more build flexibility. If you haven't learned how to never die in the game with this crazy Immortal build, check out my original guide video, which explains exactly how this build works and how to farm its most essential components, even in the early game. And if you watched that video a while ago, here's a quick refresher on the basics of how this build works. In Enshrouded, even if your health bar drops to 0, as long as you're using the appropriate combination of gear and gems, you'll technically stay alive, or rather, come back to life like a zombie. When this happens, you'll see your bar completely empty of health. Sometimes you'll get a message pop up saying you actually did die, and then your character will heal a bit and be able to keep on fighting. Each time this effect triggers, you'll lose your buffs as if you actually died, but you'll keep a hold of all the items in your inventory as if you never died at all. However, if you want to negate this a bit, a neat tip I forgot to mention in my previous video is that using the last meal skill still works to prevent the loss of your food buffs on death. This is super handy for both saving you from wasting food and avoiding dying into doing the run back to collect your items. This interaction works throughout early, mid, and late game, regardless of what weapon you use, so you can easily incorporate it into whatever playstyle you prefer and whichever part of the game you're at. Since I discussed the limitations of this build, the best rings, gems, and weapons to use to trigger the Undying effect more reliably, and the benefits of incorporating the Counterstrike skill and Retaliation enhancement, let's talk about the brand new Enshrouded patch and how it affected all of this. If you don't know, patch 8 was a major combat and balance patch dropped in preparation of Enshrouded version 1.0 that should release later this year, and it specifically affected the 2 rings we use in the Immortal build. Previously, the Life Leech perk on both the Gemini ring and the Ring of Endless Life had a percentage chance to trigger Life Leech back to the wearer when dealing damage to enemies. With the new update, these 2 rings now work a little differently. Instead of how they used to have Life Leech, which only had a chance of triggering, these rings now have the Health Leech enhancement as found on weapons, which heals you for 5% of any and all damage you deal. Now, what does this mean and why is it important? Both Health Leech and Life Leech are special in Enshrouded. Unlike most normal sources of passive healing, like the Water Aura skill or health regen you get from food or gear, Health Leech and Life Leech don't stop healing you after your health drops to 0. Paired with damage over time effects, you could trigger Life Leech after you've technically died, and this could allow you to revive based on that damage. The devs changing the rings to Health Leech versus Life Leech in the recent update is a massive buff for the consistency of this build. While the old Life Leech just had a percentage chance to heal you, Health Leech is a guaranteed amount of health returned to you every time you deal damage, making revival from this build way more reliable. The Health Leech of these rings still stack together, but instead of giving you a higher chance of triggering healing, they now give you 5% of the amount of the damage you deal back as health per ring, so you can now heal up to 10% with both life-stealing rings equipped. This makes it so now you only need 1 ring to prevent your death, freeing up a slot for you to be more creative with your build while keeping Immortality at the center, or just making this build even easier to use in the early game, since you only have to farm 1 ring for it. In the new update, there have been some other noticeable changes to the rings. Along with armor, rings now have unlockable perks, aka enhancements, to go along with their old stats. These enhancements grant additional stat boosts when you upgrade them. Previously, your options for these Health Leech rings used to be just the Gemini ring and the Ring of Endless Life, and both of these still work. But the Commander's Ring has also had Health Leech added to it, making it now work as an early game option for this build as well. Now, I've only found these rings at the Epic tier, but some players have claimed to have come across legendary versions of these rings, so there may be another level of enhancements to see on these. In the former video, I covered how to get the Gemini Ring, but here's how to get the Commander's Ring if you want the extra defense from heavy plates. Head up to Pike's Reach and make your way to the capital area. Once you're there, you'll have to defeat the Fell Wisp Wyvern, and the ring will have a chance to drop when you loot it. The Ring of Endless Life is a random world drop, but since it's found at level 5, it's most likely restricted to the Springlands biome, and maybe earlier sections of the Revelwood. As for which ring is the best out of these 3, that obviously will depend on the kind of build you want to use. I will mention, however, something important with the way damage over time on the player interacts with self-resurrecting in this case. After dying from negative status effects like fire or poison, these effects don't persist beyond the player's health dropping to 0. Since statuses like these will be cleared when the player resurrects, this can diminish the overall benefit of things like fire or poison resistance in particular, as found on the Ring of Endless Life. Also, unlike fire, poison is less commonly used by enemies, and can be considered minimal compared to the presence of threats from the rest of physical damage types overall. Physical damage, which is something the Commander's Ring provides ample defense for. While fell enemies are also an abundant enemy type, +3 or even +6 additional Shroud armor that 1 or 2 Rings of Endless Life provide doesn't really amount to a whole lot of defense when you consider that most of their attacks are physical anyways. The only attacks that count as Shroud shroud damage are the magical white or blue flame type attacks that certain fell enemies are capable of. Even with 2 rings at +6 shroud armor, the damage reduction is literally a flat value in most cases. When you take the difference between 203 and 197 damage into account, the shroud armor that the rings provide here is really just a drop in the bucket for how much defense it's putting in. There's also the strange case of shroud gazers, those floating eyeball-like enemies in the game. While wearing 2 of the endless life rings, you actually take 1 more point of damage than when not wearing them. I'm not sure why this would be the case, but it's most definitely a bug. When we take all this into consideration, the Commander's Ring makes for a good choice in general defense over the Ring of Endless Life, while the Gemini Ring would be better for more specialized damage against fell enemies, along with Shroud Time perks. As for other ways this Immortality interaction was buffed, the change from Life Leech chance to 5% Health Leech has also improved the reliability of Counterstrike. This skill node has also seen a few adjustments with the arrival of this update. As of this patch, Counterstrike has been reworked into a node that is now capable of stacking. Previously, it used to grant a 20% chance of reflecting damage back to the attacker. Now it's been split into 3 unlockable tiers, costing 1 skill point per tier. Each tier grants an additional 8% chance of reflecting damage. At level 3, this makes it a 24% chance, closer to a 1 in 4 chance of triggering, higher than the previous 20% or 1 in 5 chance. Since it's a stackable skill node, and the devs just added enhancements to equipment that add to the top of those node type skill point limit, we can bump that near 1 in 4 chance even higher with the use of certain armor pieces. As far as I'm aware, there are at least 2 armor pieces in the game that grant additional points to the skill in question: the Spellbreaker Pants and the Gloom Monarch Trousers. The first of these has Counterstrike at the 3rd unlock, which adds 1 point to the limit, bringing the chance up to 32%. The Gloom Monarch pair, however, puts another 2 points into Counterstrike when fully upgraded, placing the reflection chance all the way up to 40%. With there being more gear pieces left to find at higher tiers, we may see that limit increase up to 6 or even 7 points with the right equipment. With the sole use of that node at those levels, that would bump our chances of survival by 48 or 56%. That's practically a coin flip's chance of reflecting damage, which are some pretty decent odds. Pairing the Retaliation weapon enhancement with Health Leech is still a viable choice this update, as Retaliation makes Resurrection guaranteed against melee attacks, taking that chance out of the equation. Ranged, status, or magic attacks will still be a concern even with Retaliation, so having a few points in Counterstrike helps to keep you somewhat covered for those types of damage. Before this patch, your Retaliation weapon of choice would also need the Health Leech enhancement for this to work. This limited your options to 6 weapons, 1 being a wand and the other 5 being swords. With this update, however, the changes to the rings widens the scope of our options to any weapon with Retaliation, expanding that number to more than 20 weapons that fall under that category. The Metal Star Mace can be randomly found in an area as early as the Springlands, while 2 wands, 2 greatswords, and 1 single-handed sword can be found in the Revelwood, the very next biome over. There's also a good handful of weapons with this enchantment throughout the late game, up to the point that it's possible to find them between the Alvaneve summits and in the current endgame area of Cromville. If you'd rather have full and complete immortality, as opposed to just melee immunity, then the best mid to late game option will be the gems I went through in the previous video. These give you several different ways to either prevent or outright reverse a death, and equipping any gem that does damage over time will enable us to achieve the much desired effect of living through mortal pain. Achieving immortality through this method used to require finding a weapon with Health Leech on it and pairing it up with a gem that's capable of doing damage over time. With the changes in this patch though, since you only need Health Leech on one of your rings for the immortality, having Health Leech on your weapon is no longer a concern in order to get the benefits the gems provide. This means the gems that work with this method can be applied to literally any weapon of your choice, as long as it has a gem slot, giving you much more freedom and flexibility in terms of the combat playstyles you're able to go for. The recent update did not affect the gems in the game, so my breakdown of reliability of each gem and my personal recommendations for the best gems in the previous video and reasoning for choosing them hasn't really changed. Be sure to upgrade these though, as the reliability of many damage over time gems scale with the level that they're upgraded to. Beforehand, I mentioned wondering if this interaction allowing you to avoid death in the game was accidental or intentional, and a lot of players in the comments suspected it might get patched out with the new combat update. As of now though, it seems that the devs are at the very least okay with this mechanic, and perhaps even leaning into it a bit, especially since several of the components of this build have now been significantly improved. Ultimately, it's up to them whether or not the functionality of this interaction has changed, so we'll see whether it continues to stay as the game leaves early access and transitions into the full release. What do you think about the improvement to Immortality in Enshrouded? Should it continue to stay in the game as it is, or should the devs consider making changes to it before the game is officially out? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.